Who wants to talk about some saints? So today we're talking about Saint Faustina Kowalska. She was a Polish nun who was born in 1903, and she was number 3 of 10 kids. And she was born into kind of a poor family, living in a rural Polish town, kind of a farming community. I actually had the opportunity to visit her little house that she grew up in a few years ago when I went to Poland myself, and it was really pretty, really beautiful. So yeah, she lived a very simple childhood, and she first felt the call to become a nun when she was 7 years old. And she tried to join the convent right after she finished school. So this was like maybe when she was like 14, 15, 16. And her parents were like, absolutely not. Worst idea ever. So she listened to her parents and she didn't become a nun. Then she worked as a housekeeper for a little while, raising money to support her family. And then when she was 17, she went to a dance with her sister. And she was having a grand old time, just bopping around, listening to music. And, I don't know, when was this? 1918, 1920. Anyway, so listening to music at a dance. And she all of a sudden sees a vision of Jesus standing right in front of her. And he's bloody and bruised and suffering. So she identified this as a suffering Jesus. And he looked her right in the eyes. And she was so shook to the core of who she was, this little 17-year-old girl, so shook to the core of who she was that she left the dance and went straight to the church. While she was at the church, Jesus appeared to her again and said, "You need to go become a nun. Now. Not tomorrow. Now." So, being the good little girl that she was, she left for the next major town the following day. She got on the train and just went into the major city, Warsaw, Poland, and she systematically went to every convent she could find to try and become a nun. And surprisingly, nobody wanted her. She went to multiple places and nobody would accept her. They either didn't like something about how she looked, or she was too poor, she looked too poor. And so finally, there was one convent that decided to accept her. The Congregation of the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy, but they had a condition for her. She had to buy her own habit. A habit is the clothing that a nun wears, with the veil, the robe, the dress that they wear. So she had to buy her own habit. Well, she's dirt poor. She didn't have any money. So she actually had to go work as a housekeeper again in Warsaw until she could pay enough money to purchase all the cloth to make her own habit. And that took her about a year to save up enough money to just buy this one piece of clothing. But she wanted it so badly that she stuck to it. So she bought her own habit and they let her in. And then from there, she lived a very normal nun existence. She became a cook for her community, and she actually got moved around from house to house. They had multiple houses, multiple convents in different places in Poland and in Eastern Europe and in Lithuania. And so she went to multiple houses as a cook. And then about a year or two after she became a nun, that's when she first started getting sick. And St. Faustina really struggled with her health her entire life after this point. So she was always kind of sick, always in and out of the medical ward, always in and out of the hospital, always really struggling with her health. And this was something that would define her life for her. So she was working, got sick, recovered. And then the most striking thing that happened was 4 years after she decided to become a nun and entered the convent, Jesus appeared to her. It's kind of shocking, Jesus appearing to you. Like, imagine that if Jesus were to come and stand in front of you right now. It's a little bit shocking. We would all be a little bit scared out of our minds, I think. So she has a vision of Jesus who appears as the King of Mercy. the King of Mercy. And he tells her, I want you to paint an image of what you see right now. And she's like, but I'm not a painter. I'm a nun. And he said, no, you need to have this image painted of me. And so this is the image that we see today in so many of our churches. This image is the Divine Mercy image. And so this is the image that she saw of Jesus. I'll tell you about this image a little bit later because there are a couple images floating around out there, but this one is the one that she had painted. So she tried to find a painter and wasn't having any luck with it, none whatsoever. So she got moved around a little bit more. The visions kept coming. Jesus kept appearing to her. And she didn't quite know what to do with it. And no one really believed her until she got transferred to the capital of Lithuania, Vilnius. I've actually been there. I was there in January. It was very, 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 very cold and very dark because it's so far north, the sun would set at 3 p.m. and then it would rise at 10 a.m. And so you only had a few hours of sunlight every day. Anyway, Vilnius, Lithuania, she went there, and that's where she met her spiritual director. And the spiritual director got her in touch with a painter who painted this image. So the painter painted this image, and the story goes is that she actually cried when she saw it, but not from joy, from sadness, because it didn't look anything like what she had seen. Jesus was so amazing and so beautiful, and the painter just couldn't capture it, and it broke her heart. Her spiritual director actually became really involved with her seeing the visions, and he started to believe her. He actually had her sent to a shrink to get a psychiatric evaluation to make sure she wasn't a little crazy seeing things, you know? That's normal, right? You see Jesus too, right? No, so he got her a psychiatric evaluation and she passed. She wasn't crazy. And so he really started to believe her. You really must be seeing Jesus. And so he started to help her and he advised her, I want you to write down everything that Jesus is telling you. I want you to write down all of your visions. And so we have that today in this book, The Diary of St. Faustina, and this is the whole collection of all of her visions and her life story. And it's actually a very good read, relatively, even though it's really, really thick, it's actually a fairly easy read because she wasn't very educated. So her writing style is actually very simple. So in the visions and in her book, she writes about a prayer called the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. And Jesus instructs her that I want you to, put this prayer together, and I want you to start telling people about my mercy. I want you to start telling people how merciful I am, how merciful God is. And so at one point she was really worried that she wasn't doing a good enough job, that she was too sickly, she was too weak. And Jesus had something really beautiful to tell her. He said that she only needed to do whatever was in her power and that he would make up for the lack. To just keep plugging along, do what she could do, and he would fill in the gaps and do everything else for her. Which is a very beautiful thought. So she spent her lifetime preaching God's mercy. But unfortunately, she became more ill and more sickly as time went on, and her health really started to decline in about 1938, in 1937, 1938. And then she finally died in October 1938, and she was only 35 years old. So this fantastic woman who had these incredible visions and a fantastic message died very young. So next time, we're going to be talking about the Divine Mercy Chaplet, the different prayers that are involved. You pray it on rosary beads, and how to pray it and what to think about when you're praying it. And yeah, Divine Mercy Chaplet. All right, see you next time.